The breaking point. The Galactic Union had stood for 12,000 years. Within its grand assembly hall on the neutral world of Axiom Prime, representatives from 800 civilizations gathered to discuss trade agreements, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges. The hall itself was a marvel of architecture, built from crystalline materials that caught and refracted light from a dozen different suns, creating rainbows that danced across the assembled delegates. Elder Thessera of the Valorn Collective sat in her customary position near the ancient archives. Her species had existed long before most others in the chamber, and she carried the weight of that history in every slow, deliberate movement. Her 4 eyes, each adapted to see different spectrums of light, watched the younger species with patient concern. They were so confident, so certain of their understanding of the galaxy. They had forgotten the old lessons, the warnings passed down through generations of galactic civilization. The humans had arrived in the galactic community 300 years ago. Their small delegation, led by Ambassador Chen Wei, had approached the Union with humility and curiosity. They offered scientific knowledge, artistic achievements, and most importantly, a genuine desire for peaceful cooperation. The galaxy had welcomed them cautiously at first, then warmly as humanity proved themselves reliable partners, innovative thinkers, and peaceful neighbors. Thessera remembered those early days. She had been one of the few who had studied human history during their isolation on their single world. What she found had both fascinated and terrified her. Humans were capable of extraordinary compassion and remarkable cruelty, often within the same individual. They could create breathtaking art while simultaneously developing weapons of unimaginable destruction. They were walking contradictions, and that made them dangerous in ways most species could never understand. The Zarkonian Empire had emerged 2 centuries after humanity's arrival. They were a militant species, evolved from pack hunters on a harsh world where only the strong survived. Their philosophy was simple: power determined worth and conquest proved power. They had absorbed 17 smaller civilizations into their empire, not through diplomacy but through overwhelming military force. Supreme Commander Vrath stood before the Galactic Council, his scaled hide gleaming under the chamber's lights. He was massive even by Zarkonian standards, nearly 3 meters tall with muscles that rippled beneath armor plating that had evolved over millions of years. His species had never known a natural predator. They had always been the apex, and they carried that certainty into every interaction. The human delegation sat quietly in their section. Commander Elena Vasquez, who had replaced the retired Ambassador Chen, listened to Vrath's demands with an expression that revealed nothing. Her brown eyes, so much smaller than the multifaceted organs of many species present, seemed to absorb everything without judgment. Beside her sat Dr. James Morrison, humanity's chief xenobiologist, and Captain Liu Zhang, military liaison for the Human Defense Initiative. Vrath's demands were clear and insulting. The Zarkonian Empire wanted access to human territory for military exercises. They wanted human technology, particularly their propulsion systems, which were more efficient than anything else in the galaxy. Most concerning, they wanted human worlds to acknowledge Zarkonian superiority and pay tribute accordingly. Commander Vasquez stood slowly. Her small frame seemed insignificant next to Vrath's imposing bulk, but there was something in her posture that made several of the older species sit up straighter. Thessera recognized it immediately. It was the stance of someone who had learned patience through necessity, not through nature. "The answer is no," Vasquez said simply. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity values our partnership with the Galactic Union. We value peace. We value cooperation. But we will not submit to intimidation or threats. We respectfully decline your demands and hope you will reconsider your approach to interspecies relations." Vrath's laugh boomed through the chamber. It was a sound designed by evolution to freeze prey in place, to trigger the flight response in anything that heard it. Most species in the room shifted uncomfortably. The humans didn't move. "You are a species of weak creatures," Vrath declared. "You have no natural weapons, no armor, no size. You live on a single world and control only 15 systems. The Zarkonian Empire spans 60 systems and commands fleets that could darken your sky. You will comply or you will be made to comply." Thessera rose from her seat, her ancient joints creaking with the effort. "Supreme Commander Vrath," she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia, I must advise caution. The humans are not what you think they are. Our archives contain records of 12 species who made similar assumptions. None of those species exist anymore. Vrath turned his attention to the elder. Your archives contain myths and legends, old one. The galaxy has grown beyond such superstitions. We live in an age of reason and strength. Then let me speak plainly, Thessara continued. The humans are gardeners. They tend their space carefully, nurturing peace and cooperation. But every gardener keeps tools for removing weeds that threaten their garden. You would be wise not to test those tools. The Supreme Commander dismissed her concerns with a wave of his clawed hand. The council session ended in tense silence. The Zarkonian delegation departed first, their heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. The human delegation remained seated, saying nothing, their expressions unreadable. 3 weeks later, the attack came. Haven's Light was humanity's premier research station, located in the Kepler 442 system. It wasn't a military installation. There were no weapon platforms, no defense fleets, no soldiers. It was home to 3,000 of humanity's brightest minds and their families. Scientists studying stellar formation, medical researchers working on cures for diseases that plagued multiple species, engineers developing more efficient life support, systems that they freely shared with any civilization that wanted them. The station also housed educational facilities, where children learned about the galaxy's diversity. There was a cultural center where humans and aliens shared art, music, and stories. There were gardens where botanists from a dozen worlds worked together to understand how different ecosystems could coexist. It was everything humanity believed the galaxy could be at its best. The Zarkonian attack fleet arrived without warning. 15 warships dropped out of hyperspace and opened fire immediately. They didn't send demands or ultimatums. They didn't target the station's communications or propulsion systems. They fired on the residential sections first, the places where families slept, where children played, where the elderly shared stories of Earth under synthetic starlight. Dr. Sarah Chen was in the agricultural bay when the first explosion rocked the station. She had been studying hybrid crops with her Valorn colleague, Thessara's granddaughter Milla. The two had become close friends over 5 years of collaboration, sharing not just scientific knowledge but personal stories, hopes, and dreams. The emergency alarm screamed through the station's corridors. Sarah ran toward the residential section where her husband and daughter were. She never made it. The second wave of fire collapsed the corridor ahead of her, and the station's atmosphere began venting into space. Her last transmission, captured by the station's black box, was simple and devastating. Tell them we tried. Tell them we always wanted peace. Commander Elena Vasquez received the report in her quarters on the diplomatic vessel Cooperation's Promise. She read the casualty list 3 times. 3,000 names. Scientists, teachers, engineers, children, elderly retirees who had chosen to spend their final years among the stars. All gone. Haven's Light was now just debris drifting in the cold void. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Vrath appeared via hologram, looking pleased with himself. The humans have been taught respect, he announced. Their research station was eliminated as a demonstration of Zarkonian power. This is what happens to species who refuse our reasonable demands. The assembled delegates expected immediate human retaliation. Battlefleet's declaration of war demands for justice. Instead, Commander Vasquez simply stood and made a brief statement. The Galactic Union is hereby notified that humanity is withdrawing from all diplomatic activities for a period of 1 standard galactic month. We will honor existing trade agreements but will not be available for council sessions or negotiations during this time. We apologize for any inconvenience. Then she left. The entire human delegation departed Axiom Prime within the hour. No threats, no demands, no emotional outbursts. Just calm, quiet withdrawal. The galaxy didn't understand. The Valorn Collective sent urgent messages asking about humanity's plans. The Centauri Federation offered military support if humans wanted to strike back at the Zarkonians. The Altair Confederacy volunteered their fleets for joint operations. All messages went unanswered. Elder Thessara accessed the restricted archives, pulling up records that hadn't been reviewed in 4 centuries. She found the file she was looking for and sent it to every council member with a simple message. Remember the Krillian Dominion. Remember the Thaxian Empire. Remember the Vortan hegemony. They all made the same mistake. Learn from history before it's too late. Supreme Commander Vrath celebrated his victory with a grand feast in the Zarkonian capital. His warriors praised his tactical brilliance, his decisive action, his willingness to show the galaxy that the Zarkonian Empire would not be denied. Intelligence reports showed no human military movements, no fleet deployments, no preparations for war. The humans were hiding, behaving exactly as weak prey species should when faced with superior predators. But something was changing in human space. Subtle shifts that most observers missed. Trade convoys that had reliably traveled the same routes for decades simply stopped appearing. Human merchant vessels that had carried goods between worlds for generations returned to human systems and didn't leave again. The vast network of human commerce that had helped prosperity spread throughout the galaxy quietly contracted, pulling back within humanity's borders like a creature drawing in its limbs before striking. Technical advisors who had been helping other civilizations improve their infrastructure sent polite messages explaining they needed to return home for family matters. Scientists collaborating on joint projects apologized for suddenly ending their research partnerships. Even human tourists, those curious explorers who had become common sights on alien worlds, bought passage home and disappeared. The galaxy began to feel humanity's absence like a missing tooth, a small empty space that somehow seemed larger than it should. And in that absence, something else was happening. Something that wouldn't be fully understood until it was far too late to matter. In the Martian shipyards, silent facilities that hadn't operated at full capacity in 200 years suddenly came to life. Deep in human space, on worlds with names like Forge, Crucible, and Anvil, factories began producing components according to specifications that existed only in classified archives. Men and women who had spent their lives as teachers, farmers, artists, and engineers reported to mobilization centers and underwent transformations they had trained for but never expected to experience. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the war room of Earth's orbital command, looking at displays that showed the positions of every human vessel, every military installation, every asset that could be brought to bear. Around her stood individuals who had once been diplomats, scientists, and peacekeepers. Now they wore different uniforms and carried different responsibilities. "The Zarkonians believe we're weak because we prefer peace," she said quietly to her assembled officers. "They think our kindness is the same as helplessness. They think our patience means we can't be pushed too far." She looked at each officer in turn. "They're about to learn why our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every challenge their single world could throw at them. They're about to learn why every elder species in this galaxy keeps warning others never to push humanity past the breaking point." Captain Liu Zhang stepped forward. "Ma'am, what are our rules of engagement?" Vasquez didn't hesitate. "The Zarkonians targeted civilians first. They killed our children, our elderly, our people who had never held weapons or wished harm on anyone. They did this deliberately to send a message." Her voice remained steady, but something cold and certain entered her eyes. "We will send a reply. Protocol Omega is authorized." The officers in the room went still. Protocol Omega existed in human military doctrine, but it had never been activated in the 3 centuries since humanity joined the Galactic Union. It was the final option, reserved for threats that could not be reasoned with, negotiated with, or safely contained. It was humanity's answer to the question, what happens when you harm those we protect? Dr. James Morrison spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood what was about to unfold. "Commander, once we begin this, there's no going back. The galaxy will see us differently. We can't unring this bell." "I know," Vasquez replied. "But if we don't respond with absolute certainty, others will see it as permission. More innocent people will die. More families will be destroyed. The peace we've helped build for 300 years will crumble because predators will think we're prey." She looked around the room. "We are not prey. We are gardeners. And it's time to tend our garden." Across human space, the transformation continued. Within 2 weeks, humanity had quietly shifted from a peaceful, trading civilization into something the galaxy hadn't seen in living memory. The change was complete, total, and terrifying in its efficiency. Soon, the Zarkonian Empire would learn what Elder Thessera had tried to warn them about. They would learn why humanity's preference for peace should never be mistaken for inability to do anything else. They would learn that some lessons can only be taught once, because no one survives to need them taught twice. The garden was about to be tended, and the weeds would be removed. The garden must be tended. The first sign that something fundamental had changed came 3 days after humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. A Zarkonian patrol fleet, emboldened by their Supreme Commander's victory, entered the edge of human territory near the Tau Ceti system. They weren't there to attack, merely to demonstrate their dominance, to remind humanity that the Zarkonian Empire could go wherever it pleased. The patrol consisted of 8 warships, each crewed by experienced warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns. Fleet Commander Zek led them with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. His tactical display showed human space ahead, quiet and seemingly undefended. No challenge came over the communications channels. No warning shots were fired. The humans appeared to be cowering in their systems exactly as Zek expected. Then his ship simply stopped working. Every system failed simultaneously. Propulsion, weapons, communications, life support, everything went dark in the span of 3 seconds. Emergency backups that should have activated immediately remained silent. Zek's crew scrambled in the darkness trying to understand what had happened. There had been no attack, no energy signatures, no warning. Their ships had simply been turned off like someone flipping a switch. In the silence and darkness, a single communication came through on the most basic emergency frequency, the kind that would work even if every other system was dead. The voice was calm, almost gentle. "Commander Zek, this is Captain Liu Jiang of the Human Defense Initiative. You have entered our space without permission. We are returning your vessels to the nearest Zarkonian outpost. Do not enter human territory again. This is your only warning." The Zarkonian ships began moving, not under their own power but towed by something their sensors couldn't detect. 6 hours later, they were deposited just outside Zarkonian space, their systems suddenly functioning again. Zek's report to Supreme Commander Vrath was met with disbelief and anger. "Impossible," Vrath declared. "The humans had no technology capable of such things. Zek must have encountered some natural phenomenon, some spatial anomaly that disrupted his ships." But more reports began arriving. Zarkonian intelligence outposts near human space went silent. Not destroyed, just silent. When investigation teams arrived, they found the facilities completely intact but empty. Every piece of equipment worked perfectly. Every system was operational. The personnel had simply vanished without any sign of struggle or forced entry. Elder Thesara watched these developments from her home world with growing dread. She had seen this pattern before in the archives. The humans were moving, but not in ways that most species could recognize as military action. They weren't massing fleets or issuing declarations of war. They were doing something far more thorough. She sent another urgent message to the Galactic Council. The humans are implementing what they call Protocol Omega. Based on historical records, this is not warfare as we understand it. This is elimination. The Zarkonian Empire has approximately 2 weeks before they cease to exist. Any species that interferes will be treated as an equal threat. Stay out of human space. Stay out of Zarkonian space. Let this run its course. Supreme Commander Vrath called an emergency military council. His generals and admirals gathered in the war room of the Imperial Palace on Zarkon Prime. The holographic display showed their empire, 60 systems strong, each defended by fleets and ground forces that had conquered 17 civilizations. "The humans are playing games," Vrath announced. "They use tricks and illusions because they lack the strength for real combat. We will demonstrate our superiority by striking at Earth itself. Prepare our assault fleet. We will end this farce by destroying the human homeworld." Fleet Admiral Krone, one of Vrath's most experienced commanders, hesitated. "Supreme Commander, I advise caution. The reports from our intelligence division are concerning. We've lost contact with 14 outposts, 3 patrol fleets, and 2 listening stations, all near human space, and the way Commander Zek's ships were disabled suggests technology we don't understand." Vrath's hand slammed down on the table, cracking the reinforced surface. "I don't care about technology. I care about strength, numbers. The humans have 15 systems. We have 60. They have a fraction of our military force. We will crush them through sheer power." The assault fleet began assembling, 200 warships, the largest force the Zarkonian Empire had ever deployed. They would jump directly into the Sol system, bypass any human defenses, and reduce Earth to a lifeless rock. It would be the ultimate demonstration of Zarkonian supremacy. On Earth, in the underground command center buried beneath the Himalayan mountains, Commander Elena Vasquez watched the Zarkonian fleet movements with complete calm. Around her, officers monitored displays showing information that would have seemed impossible to most galactic civilizations. Human intelligence networks had penetrated every level of Zarkonian military and government. They knew the fleet's composition, its planned route, its intended target, and the exact timing of the assault. "They're coming straight for Earth," Captain Liu Jiang reported. 200 ships. They'll arrive in 72 hours. "Good," Vasquez said simply. "Dr. Morrison, are the other operations proceeding on schedule?" Dr. James Morrison, now wearing the uniform of the Human Strategic Command, nodded. "Zarkon Prime will be evacuated in 48 hours. The outer colonies are already empty. We're maintaining the illusion of normal activity through automated systems, but there are no Zarkonians left in any of the targeted systems." "Evacuated?" Captain Liu Jiang looked confused. "I thought Protocol Omega meant elimination." Vasquez turned to face him. "Captain, we're not monsters." The Zarkonian military made the decision to attack civilians. The Zarkonian leadership gave the order. But there are billions of ordinary Zarkonians who had no say in those decisions. Children, families, people who just want to live their lives. "We won't kill them." "Then what are we doing?" Liu asked. "We're removing the problem," Vasquez explained. "The Zarkonian Empire will cease to exist. Their military capacity will be eliminated. Their leadership will face justice, but their people will live. They'll be relocated to designated worlds where they can build new societies, ones that hopefully learn better values than conquest and domination." Dr. Morrison pulled up a holographic display. "We've been working with several galactic species who agreed to accept Zarkonian refugees. The Valorn Collective, the Centauri Federation, even the Altair Confederacy. They understand what we're doing and why. The Zarkonian civilians are being told they're evacuating due to a natural disaster. By the time they realize what's actually happening, they'll be safe on new worlds, far from the consequences their leaders created." Liu Jiang struggled to process this information. "But the Supreme Commander, the military, they'll still be in those systems when we do what needs to be done," Vasquez finished. "Yes, they chose this path. They were warned. They proceeded anyway. The galaxy needs to understand that there are lines that cannot be crossed, actions that have consequences so absolute that no one will ever want to risk them again." The 72 hours passed. The Zarkonian assault fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, their weapons charged, their warriors ready for glorious battle. Fleet Admiral Crone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Fist, looking at the tactical display showing the human home system. It was empty. No defense fleets, no orbital platforms, no signs of military preparation, just the planets moving in their ancient orbits around their star. Earth hung in the display like a blue jewel, seemingly undefended and vulnerable. "Something is wrong," Crone said quietly. "This is too easy." Then the human response came, not from ships or weapons platforms, but from something the Zarkonians had never encountered. Space itself seemed to change around them. The laws of physics that govern propulsion, energy, and matter suddenly operated differently within a precisely defined sphere that encompassed the entire Zarkonian fleet. Ships that had been moving at combat speeds simply stopped. Not slowed down or decelerated. They just stopped moving as if momentum had ceased to exist. Weapons that were charged and ready to fire lost their energy in an instant. Not through any defensive system, but because the fundamental forces that allowed them to function had been temporarily suspended. Commander Vasquez's voice came through on every Zarkonian ship simultaneously. "Fleet Admiral Crone, this is humanity's final warning. You have entered our space with hostile intent. You represent a military force that deliberately targeted and killed our civilians, including children. You were given opportunities for peace. You chose violence. These are the consequences." Crone tried to respond, but his communications were being selectively blocked. He could hear the humans perfectly, but couldn't transmit anything beyond his own ship. He watched his tactical display in growing horror as human vessels began appearing, not through hyperspace jumps, but by simply becoming visible. They had been there all along, their presence hidden by technology that made stealth systems look primitive. There were only 30 human ships, 30 vessels against his 200. But Crone suddenly understood why Elder Thessera had tried to warn them. These weren't military vessels in any conventional sense. They were something else. Tools designed for a specific purpose, and that purpose was about to become terrifyingly clear. "You will be permitted to leave," Vasquez continued. "Your weapons will remain non-functional until you exit the Sol system. You will return to Zarkonian space and deliver this message to Supreme Commander Vrath. The Zarkonian Empire ends today. Not through conquest or subjugation, but through removal. Your military will be dismantled. Your leadership will face justice. Your people have been relocated to safety because humanity does not wage war on civilians, even when their government does. Return home, Fleet Admiral. Watch what happens when you push gardeners too far. The Zarkonian fleet, humiliated and helpless, was escorted out of the Sol system by human vessels that could have destroyed them at any moment but chose not to. Krone's journey back to Zarkonian space took 3 days. Every hour he tried to contact military command, the Imperial Palace, any Zarkonian installation. There was no response, just silence. When his fleet finally arrived at Zarkon Prime, they found empty cities. The capital world that had housed 3 billion Zarkonians was intact, undamaged, but completely uninhabited. The buildings stood untouched. The infrastructure functioned perfectly, but there were no Zarkonians anywhere. Krone led a security team to the Imperial Palace. They found Supreme Commander Vrath in his war room, standing before the holographic display that showed his empire. Every system still showed on the map, but there was a growing red indicator spreading across them, marking each one as evacuated. "They didn't fight us," Vrath whispered, his voice hollow. "They didn't conquer us. They just removed us. Like we were nothing but an inconvenience." Captain Liu Zheng stood beside Commander Vasquez in the war room on Earth, watching the final reports come in. 60 Zarkonian systems all evacuated. 15 billion civilians relocated to new worlds. The entire Zarkonian military, over 2 million personnel, confined to their now empty homeworld with no weapons, no ships, and no means of leaving. "What happens to them now?" Liu asked, gesturing to the Zarkonian military personnel. "They'll stand trial," Vasquez said. "The Galactic Council will convene a special tribunal. Those who gave orders to target civilians will face justice. Those who simply followed orders will undergo rehabilitation programs. Some may eventually rejoin galactic society. Others will spend their lives confined to Zarkon Prime, a living monument to the consequences of their choices." Dr. Morrison approached with a final report. "The galactic response is coming in. Most species are expressing a combination of relief and fear. The Valorn Collective sent their gratitude for handling the situation without massive casualties. The Centauri Federation wants assurances that humanity won't use these capabilities against anyone else. Several younger species are asking if they need to fear humans now." Vasquez considered this carefully. "Send a message to all galactic civilizations. Make it public and clear. Humanity seeks peace above all things. We value cooperation, mutual respect, and the diverse beauty of galactic civilization. We will share our knowledge, our friendship, and our protection with any species willing to reciprocate. But we will not tolerate threats to innocent life. We will not accept attacks on civilians. We will not permit genocide, slavery, or the targeting of children by any species for any reason." The Zarkonians learned this lesson. We hope no one else needs to. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Elder Thessera added her own commentary, drawing from the archives to explain what humanity had done and why. Her analysis was simple. Humans were not warriors or conquerors. They were gardeners who tended the garden of galactic peace with infinite patience. But every gardener kept tools for removing threats to their garden, and humanity's tools were sharper and more effective than anyone had imagined. 3 months after the crisis began, the Galactic Council reconvened. The Zarkonian Empire no longer existed. Its territory had been redistributed to species who agreed to uphold peaceful principles. Its military was confined and undergoing transformation. Its leadership faced trials that would determine their fates. Human delegations returned to their diplomatic roles. Commander Elena Vasquez, now wearing her civilian uniform again, stood before the council to address concerns about humanity's demonstrated capabilities. "The galaxy has seen what humans can do when pushed beyond our limits," she said calmly. "Some of you are afraid of that power. That's understandable. But understand this. We had these capabilities for 300 years and never used them. We could have conquered the galaxy, built an empire, dominated other species. We chose not to because that's not who we are. We're teachers, scientists, artists, farmers, parents who want our children to grow up in a galaxy where peace is possible." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from hundreds of worlds. "The Zarkonians targeted our children first. They killed our scientists, our teachers, our elderly. They did this deliberately to test our resolve, to see if we were weak. We responded not with hatred or conquest, but with the minimum force necessary to ensure it never happens again. Their civilians live. Their worlds remain intact. Only those responsible for the decision to murder innocents face consequences. This is who humanity is. We prefer peace, but we are not helpless. We value life, but we will protect the innocent. We seek cooperation, but we will not permit atrocities. Remember this, and we will never have another crisis like the one we just resolved. The Council voted unanimously to accept humanity's explanation and to formally recognize human space as inviolate. New protocols were established. Any attack on human civilians would be considered an attack. On the entire Galactic Union, any species that targeted children of any civilization would face immediate and absolute response. Elder. Thesara updated the Galactic Archives one final time. Her entry would be read by students for millennia to come. On this date, the galaxy relearned an ancient lesson. Humanity seeks peace with dedication that borders on stubbornness. They will negotiate when others would fight. They will forgive when others would hold grudges. They will show patience that spans centuries. But they have limits, and those limits are clearly defined. Harm the innocent under their protection, especially children, and face consequences so absolute that your civilization will cease to exist. Not through cruelty or hatred, but through the methodical efficiency of beings who have decided you are a problem that requires solving. The Zarkonian Empire learned this lesson. Their civilians survive and will hopefully build better societies on their new worlds. Their military learns accountability. Their leadership faces justice. The galaxy is safer because humanity demonstrated what lies beneath their preference for peace. Remember this. Tell your children. Pass it down through generations. The humans are gardeners, and their garden grows more beautiful each year. But never forget, they keep very sharp tools for tending that garden. On Earth, Commander Elena Vasquez walked through a memorial garden built to honor those who died on Haven's Light. 3,000 names were carved into black stone, each one representing a life dedicated to making the galaxy better through science, education, and peaceful cooperation. She stopped at Dr. Sarah Chen's name, remembering the brilliant scientist who had loved her work, her family, and her alien colleagues equally. "We remembered you," Vasquez said quietly. "We made sure the galaxy understands that your lives mattered. That targeting innocents has consequences so absolute that no one will risk it again. I hope that brings you peace wherever you are." She left a single white flower, grown in the garden soil from seeds brought from Earth. Around her, the garden grew with plants from 100 worlds, all coexisting in carefully tended harmony. It was beautiful, diverse, and peaceful, just the way humanity preferred their galaxy to be. The garden had been tended, the weeds removed, and peace bought at such a terrible price would endure for generations to come. Not because of fear alone, but because the galaxy had learned what humanity had tried to teach through patience and example. Some lines should never be crossed, and those who cross them face consequences designed not for punishment, but for permanent solution. The sleeping giants had awakened, reminded the galaxy of ancient warnings, and returned to their peaceful sleep. But everyone remembered, and remembering they chose peace.